Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Welcome back, everybody. Another week to The People's View. And alongside me, as always, is Carl Seidel. And we already know who Carl is, so we don't have to introduce Carl again. But we have a special lady today, Sandra Ziehm, who's involved mainly with the school board, but she's also a county commissioner. And I think the best way to start our show out always is let's let Sandra introduce herself and tell a little bit about her, and then we're going to ask her a bunch of questions.
Well, first off, I'm delighted to be here and always happy for the opportunity to share with our stakeholders, to give them some of the inside perspective that we enjoy when we're on these boards. I've been on the Board of Education for 6 years. Our Board of Education terms are 4 years each. So in 2 years, I will be up for re-election if I should decide to rerun. And then on the county commissioners, I've only been 1 year. I serve, of course, Carl is our chairman of the county
The boss is here.
The boss is here, and I'm sure he's keeping a close eye on me. So actually, it's been wonderful, though, working with Carl, because when you know people, there's a comfort level, and I feel like I can call him on the queue if I have a concern, or he can call me. And I think that human relationships are very important, because when we work well with each other, our stakeholders benefit. And so I'm always delighted to work with somebody like Carl.
And likewise.
Thank you,
It works
Carl.
out very well.
Yes, it does.
Why don't we start with our civics lesson 101. What does a county commissioner do?
Oh, you know, if you'd asked me that question when I was running, my answer would have been very different, Pete. It's just amazing how much I've learned in a year. We have, I think, 5 or 6 departments under us. The Registry of Deeds, the county attorney's office comes under us, the sheriff's department comes under us. The two main responsibilities, though, that we have, in my view, are the nursing home and, of course, the Department of Corrections, which in Hillsborough County is Valley Street Jail. So all of those come under our oversight, so that it goes into policies. We're just redoing all the policies in the county to make sure, and I'm talking about employee policies, policies that govern what sick leave they get and what vacation they get and what days they take off, and it's amazing how much it includes. But my first year, of course, was overwhelmed by the budget, because as everybody knows, it was a tough year for the budget. And the hardest part was that you wanted, because we were making decisions that affect people's lives. When you're talking about a nursing home, you're talking about people who really can't lobby for themselves. So we have a great responsibility to those people. And similarly, the jail, even though they are obviously a very distinctly different group of people. So those people cannot lobby for themselves. They cannot make sure that they're being taken care of. So I take those two responsibilities. And I've thought of this so often. In my view, what is constitutionally mandated and what is nice but not mandated. I believe that security, being safe on our streets, is definitely a constitutional mandate. And I also believe that health, the care of our elderly, I believe those two are mandates. And I think that we should cut everything else before we try to cut those. We should cut all the cream, all the frill, the conventions, the travel, even educational courses that are not mandated. I'm not mandated to take educational courses to be county commissioner, but people who work in the nursing home are. So we can continue that education. But to send me on trips to be educated, from my view, that's a nicety, and if we have the money, yes, I'd love to. But if I have to choose between that and taking money from the nursing home or the Valley Street Jail, then I'll stay home, because I think you have to make hard choices.
Well, you guys made a bunch of cuts this year.
And, we made quite a bit.
And looking back at the year, has the care suffered? Is it?
I don't personally think this has this, and I've thought of this, cuts are always hard to make because somebody suffers. I mean, when you're talking about people's jobs, and most of that money is jobs. So when you're talking about taking people's jobs, everybody that's painful. It just is. So there's no easy way to do that. There's no easy way to say, I'm sorry, but we can't afford your job anymore. So there were people that got hurt. But as far as the health, the welfare, the safety, I don't think they were affected. But if this year we go into those two departments and cut the same way we did last year, I am very concerned that it will, in fact, affect the safety, the welfare, the security of, and with the jail, it's not just the inmates, it's the people who work for us and it's also the public, because if for instance, I heard last weekend where one of the jails, somebody broke out, and I had to say I think it was Berlin, and I said to myself, oh, thank God that wasn't Valley Street. I was sorry it was anywhere. But if it were our jail, I would feel that to some extent that was my liability. That was my responsibility to make sure that didn't happen. And so I have to say that those concern me greatly. So I hope we're going to this year, I hope and the perfect example, and this is a hard example, but UNH Cooperative is part of our responsibility. And basically, they support the farmers. They support land preservation and those kinds of things, which are good things and have value. But again, if I have to choose between supporting that or making sure that our inmates are safe and that our elderly are protected, then I'm going to have to go over here, and I'm going to have to let UNH Cooperative go if I have to.
Well, hopefully their plan, which they're going to reorganize the whole state approach to it, will help you out in that direction. But we do have a problem, as you know. We have $4 million of TARP money that we're not going to have for fiscal year 13. We have $2 million that we took in from a surplus to help out the budget last year. So we do have a dollar figure that we have a problem with.
$6 million, a lot of money. That's
a
a
lot
lot of money.
And it's more
UNH
than we cut
Cooperative
up.
is $500,000, for example. So if you cut that whole program, you're still $5.5 million from hitting your target. But for the public's benefit, what they're talking about doing is they're talking about regionalizing the cooperative. So instead of having a cooperative, one in each of our 10 counties, we would have one for all 10 counties, which makes sense. You can see.
It does to me.
Absolutely, very logical. And we are very lucky at Hillsborough because Dan Reedy, who is in charge of our UNH cooperative, I was impressed with him last year because instead of getting rid of one person, he came up with this plan. We will take this loss, this that we're being asked to eat, the reduction in their budget, and we'll divide it across all of us. And so they all went on part-time. We have what they call educators in the UNH cooperative. They all went to part-time so that no one lost their job. And I thought that was a respectable compromise. Those are the kinds of compromises that earn you respect for people.
Now, do you hear, like Carl and I will hear, usually specifically the committees we're on, but you'll hear like general bills that go through in the House. Do you get calls from people, asking why you're cutting this, why you're doing that? Is it group-driven, let's say, or
We had a tremendous turnout at our public hearing. The room was packed. Was well over 100, maybe 150. The room, there was standing room. I mean, it was hot because there were so many people breathing in that small area. And it was wonderful because I think we had a variety. I think we had people from all walks. Yes, we had the lobbyists, if you will, the people who had a special interest. But I remember we also had one lady who was just a taxpayer from Nashville, who actually just came out to say, as a taxpayer, I have to ask you to hold tight because I can't afford increased taxes. And we need that balance. When the public comes out, it's best if you hear everybody, because that way you're looking at the whole. You're not answering just to the special interest groups who sometimes skew everything in an inappropriate way.
It just amazes me when you look at what we're faced with. they try to, paint us in the picture of just being, these mean people that just want to,
Insensitive.
go out. I say this all the time. Where do you get the money? So eventually, what you do is if you keep taxing people to death, they'll move out of the state to begin with because they can go. Yeah, I use New York as the example. Look at a lot of these big, like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck left now. They just say, the hell with it. Why should I pay New York State tax? I can do my show from anywhere, and they go do it in Florida.
Well, it's even worse in New Jersey when they started taxing the high income people. They had 20% of them leave, and they actually came out with less than they had before at a lower rate. So
There
that's
are
what you're
all
doing.
kind of things I would love to see personally, and again, I only speak for myself, but I would love to see us go to a system of electing state reps instead of all 400 in one lump sum. Let's elect 200 for 2 years, and then the next time the other 200 would come up. So you would always have continuity. You would always have at least 200 people there who had experience in the legislature, who would know the where and the why for. It's very hard to come in and immediately start, and that's what we did basically. You came in, right, fresh off the truck, if you will.
Yeah, we had a large number of new representatives for the county, and they didn't really understand the county. I think what you allowed us to do is to go through these workshops with you this year. I think that was very beneficial for us as delegates for the county.
And for me as well. It was overwhelming for me, I'll tell you.
That's the beauty of our system, and it's also the downside of when you have a volunteer legislative system. It's hard to get people that have full-time jobs that can break away to make all the meetings. And what they also don't realize is it takes you at least a half a term, if not a full term, to kind of get how the system works.
More like a full, and I also think there's another weakness. The other weakness is that because it's $100, you have only, for the most part, you have retired people who can afford to work for $100. Young people, my kids couldn't afford to do that. They have to raise their families. I don't know how you do it, Pete. You're still a young man.
I tell you,
I'm
I have
over
a unique job, that
you're
allows me
lucky.
to do it mostly on the phone, and my boss has been very fair and give me the time to do it. As it turns out, it might end up saving my career with this thing we're going to go look at now with these. It's called PODs, physician-owned distributorships, and it's kind of crazy, but that's another show. Your other job,
My other
you're on
job.
the school board, and people use all the time as example how politics all start locally. And almost always you hear them say the school board, because let's think about it, that's where the bulk of our taxes go. I don't care where you live.
It amazes me. People will come up and they know exactly what you've said. They watch those TV. When I first came on the board, I thought, nobody's going to watch these. These are dull, boring. Not so. They come up and quote you, I mean verbatim. Do you know when you said, I didn't think that was right. I didn't agree with that. And I'm going, oh, well, okay, what should I have done? Tell me, please. But I have to say, it was a great learning ground for me. It was also, of course, we have our own reporter. I don't think he's exclusively for the board now, but he was at the time, Mike Brindley. And I actually think Mike does a fairly decent job. It is hard to come in and, like our meetings are 4 hours average. So he's going to come in and in 1 or 2 paragraphs, he's going to capitalize on everything we did in those 4 hours. It's a pretty hard thing to do. And it's pretty hard sometimes to please everybody because, and I said to Mike, Mike, if I make myself look bad, I won't blame you, I promise you. But if you make me look bad and it's not true, I'm going to come after you. And he's been really good about, when I get in trouble, it's usually I got myself there. He didn't do it. So.
At the school board meetings, what's the biggest thing when people come in, citizens come in? What's usually their, let's say the top 3 things that they're concerned about?
Well, we had one of the biggest turnouts we've ever had this last week when we had the public hearing for block scheduling. Yeah. We had over 100 people. We seldom have more than 5 people at any of our meetings. Traditionally, we have 1 or 2. Usually, we have a representative from the union there, so we usually have at least 1. And then you 2 have Mike Brindley. So those are the 2 who traditionally show up for every meeting. And then every now and then, in order to talk to the board, it has to be on the agenda. So unless there's something on the agenda that is controversial or that a parent might have a particular problem with, for the most part, we don't get, I wish we got more, truthfully. I think accountability, I think that's balance of our system that sometimes breaks down because we don't hear from them as often. And because we sit there with each other, we tend to feed each other. And I'm not sure that's the balance that you need.
Didn't you have a public input period once for the Board of Education, either at the beginning or at the end of the meeting?
Well, you have...
I mean, you can talk about anything, right, in that public input meeting?
At the end, but you'd have to sit through 4 hours.
That's why the
Most people don't want to sit there 4 hours to get to say 3 words. In fact, sometimes... the board, in my view, our board has improved 150%. When I first came on, of course, Dr. Earl was in charge, and those were very tough. I wouldn't even want to tell you. Those were tough days, very tough days, especially for me, because she didn't like me too much. And then, of course, after that, we had Mr. Hoddle, and of course, we got into that $3 million budget deficit, which was a little confrontational. And so, under Superintendent Conrad, we have had, it's stabilized. And I've actually seen, I'm encouraged, because I've actually seen what I would consider to be some improvements for the educational process, which is why I came on the board, and which is why I think most people go on the board.
Explain that. What is block scheduling? How does it work?
Block scheduling is where instead of the 45-minute classes that we had in the olden days, they doubled that and made it 90 minutes. And the reason they did that was they wanted to have some classes, 45 minutes just isn't long enough. You barely get into the meat of the subject, and it's time to leave. So, for instance, in the automotive department, you wouldn't even get the car apart, and now you've got to leave, so you don't get to the part where you're learning how to repair it. And so there are some classes, while some work better with 90 minutes, there are others who don't work as well with 90 minutes because it's too long and gets drawn out too much. And so they've been looking at some moderation or some modifications to that. And this week, they actually presented the different modifications that they've been entertaining. And like they're saying, one of the problems is you have 4 90-minute classes. And so there's no time in there for anything other than those classes. For instance, if you need to talk to a counselor, or if you need anything that's over and above those classes, you have no time for it. So they're talking about maybe making it 80 minutes instead and take 10 minutes from each one, and that would give you a 40-minute period when you could have put other things that might need to be put in.
So why were there 100 people that I'm taking they don't like it?
Some did and some didn't. And some came from other parts of the nation where they had different systems, where they, see, and then they have this A-B, where you teach on A day, you have 2 A days and 3 B days kind of thing. And so on the A days, you teach the certain subjects, and on the B days, you teach the other subjects. And so there are different modifications that have been tested throughout the country. And they were really just kind of giving the parents an idea and trying to get in. The parents, stakeholders, don't realize how much most politicians listen to stakeholders. Those are the people who elect us. Mm-hmm. So if we don't listen to them, it's a good chance that we're not going to be reelected. And so if we're smart, when they come, and I think if you watch what happens, every time a large group of people comes in front of the BOE, something changes. I will just tell you, it just does.
So your opinion is the majority of them were for block scheduling or were against it?
No, I don't think, I didn't see a clear consensus either way. I think that we're going to go to some modification. I do. And I think they're not going to make the decision just yet. They're going to visit a school, I think in February, where they have a different form, and they're going to see how it works there, and they're going to do another survey. They've done 2 surveys, and the response that they got from the surveys was wonderful. We had, when parents are made to feel inclusive, when they're made to feel wanted, when they're made to feel part of the process, I believe that most parents want to be involved in their children. And so I think we just need, as a board and as a district, we need to embrace our stakeholders. We need to encourage them. We need to, and I'm always saying on the BOE, please come. Please let us hear what you think.
Well, I know in judiciary, you know, when we have the real controversial things, they show up. Most people don't show up to tell you they like what you're doing. That's what I've
They only
learned.
complain.
Yeah, they show up to complain. So, you know, whatever it was we were trying to do parental notification, which you were a big part of, there was definitely more people showing up the first time that were against us doing that than once they learned their lesson. And then when you look at, obviously, these right-to-work things and other issues like that, that's because the ones who were for right-to-work were working. They couldn't show up. They weren't getting paid
I
to
actually
show up.
went to the first meeting for Right to Work. It was fascinating in my view. Even whatever side you were on, if you sat and just listened to all of the people who were participating in that dialogue, it was educational. I felt like I learned a lot from it. I won't say I changed my view. I'm a little set in my way here, but I did appreciate the process. I appreciated that everybody got an opportunity to express how they felt one way or another, and it was our process, when it's implemented correctly, is second to none in this world, is my view. I think we are so lucky to be in this great country. My husband worked for Raytheon overseas, so we were in foreign countries, and there is no country quite like this country. I'm very prejudiced, I tell you
You
now.
can still make it better, though.
Always. There's
And
always.
that's what you have to have, this open mind.
And
on
you
this.
want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I tell myself, if it's not constructive, what you're contributing, then try to keep your mouth shut.
Well, as you know, Sandra, when my first term, I was considering my two hot ones were education I wanted to get on or judiciary. And judiciary was my first choice. Luckily, I got on, and I kind of finagled that, but luckily I got on that one. But one of the problems with me with education, and we're going to try to have, what's that author's name again, the book that I gave you?
Is it Brett?
I'll think, Stephen Brill.
Yeah.
And one of the things that got me motivated with that is I don't know of any other profession there is that you're not gauged on your ability. And I know it's difficult to do that, but when you can't basically get fired because of unions, I mean, that to me is just
And the
amazing.
bill you passed this year was wonderful. The bill, and I might quote this wrong, but I think it was 3 years used to be tenure, and now it's 5 years.
Yes.
And I actually asked Mr. Conrad about that because he and I are frequently in different corners as how we view things. And he actually said he was delighted that it went, or encouraged, maybe delighted is the wrong word, but he was encouraged that it went to 5 years because it gave them, our school is so understaffed that in order to be able to get in and observe all these teachers as often as you should, to really get your finger on the pulse, takes time. And we don't have enough administrators. We don't have enough. We're very short-handed. I mentioned to you before this meeting started, we have a music class at Elm Street. Distresses me greatly. 95 middle school kids in one classroom with one teacher, and as far as I know, no paraprofessional. If you put me in a class like that, you know what? You'd have my resignation the next day.
I'll just give you Aaron, my son, middle school. He's like 99 himself.
Well, I mean, it's just unreal that we would have a class with 95 kids. I just, how much do you think they're learning? And I've had parents tell me they're not, so I know there's, I mean, how can you control 95 middle school? These are teens. These are, you know, the most difficult years that any of us experience. So it grieves me greatly. Now, we did, with some of the money that Mayor Lozo gave us back, and I can't say enough good about. I wasn't as happy. I didn't know what to expect from Mayor Lozo, but I have to say to you that I'm very happy in that she gave us back the savings that we were able to negotiate with the contracts. She gave us 1% back. But the only caveat was it could not go for salary increases. So that money went into the classroom. Since I've been on the board, that's a first. And I have to tell you, it was such a delight for me to be able to vote for things that we've needed ever since I've been on this board that we haven't been able to finance because we just didn't have the money. Reading specialists are always at the top of my list because if you can't read, how can you learn? reading is the basis of all learning, from my view. So when kids are just passed forward, that grieves me again. But I tend to be an idealist. I do understand that. And sometimes in my idealism, I'm a little naive because sometimes it's just not possible to get to that higher ground that you're hoping for. But I never stop hoping, because it is in the hope that you strive. And without striving, we'll never get there. And I think our children deserve the best we can give them. They are a hope of our country if we are going to continue to be the global presence that we are.
Well, if I had it my way, we'd have vouchers.
Well, I don't have, actually, and that goes into the conversation of charter school. They are wanting to do a school within a school, and last night they were voting for $15,000 consultant fee to have people come in and tell us the pros and cons. Best practice was the way it was put for the charter schools. I voted against that. $15,000 to me is a lot of money when we're, when we hear things like we don't have enough paper and we don't have pencils and we have 95 in a class. And I guess I tell myself, we can look. There are books to be read. In fact, Mr. Conrad gave us a book that gives wonderful solutions. One of our new school board members was telling me, it's called, I think it's Focus, and it talks about going back to basics. And you hear that all the time. You never get far from that concept, back to basics. So I think that tells us that there's something in this back to basics thing. But we don't always seem to do it. We seem to talk about it, but we don't. See, I am a proponent. I don't believe in no fail. I believe that you keep a child until they can read, because you're not doing them a service by passing them forward. Excuse me. But I'm very opinionated.
No, you're not.
Besides some of these budget problems that you've come across, is unfunded mandates a big thing?
I think unfunded mandates, I think the federal government, I have a real aversion. I think that the federal government, I wanted to sit down and speak to Senator Ayotte, because I was hoping that I wanted to impress on her how important it is, these mandates that they're sending down. Those mandates, we have to pay for them out of our operating budget. They don't increase our operating budget, but we have to pay for them. So what happens is we have to take it out of the classroom. And you can't take it out of special education, because special education is mandated. We have certain things that in this country are favored status. Special education is one. The poor is another. We have like 50% poverty in our district, 13,000 kids, and 50% of them are on free and reduced. 50%, 7,000, almost 6,500. That's a lot of kids to be living in poverty.
Do they have to apply, or how do they determine if they're...
They do apply, but it's the teachers are pretty sensitive. And actually now, it's not, in our day, it was almost like you didn't want to apply. But when 50% are on it, it ceases to be as much
Isn't that a statewide number? I thought I heard it was statewide.
No,
50%.
I think it's both the big cities have the biggest problem.
Yeah, Manchester.
Well, but I guess 50% if you take the population, we have all the population.
Yeah, if you overall, yes. Well, of course, we have some. I think we're the second largest school.
How can you have a less than 6% unemployment rate, but 50% of the kids are on free lunch?
I think that now, I think we're in hard times out there. I actually had a child say to me, a girl say to me, I hate to see summer come because I don't know where I'm going to eat in the summer. She eats breakfast, lunch, and supper at school. And my thing about that is, if you say that it's $10,000 per child costing, that's approximately what it costs us, at least that's their statistics. I think it's much more than that, actually. But if it is $10,000, how much of that is going towards those 3 meals that we're feeding 50% of the kids a day? And how much is going towards the shots, and how much is going to the fluoride, and how much is going to... We do so much more than educate, that to say that it's $10,000 per student to educate them, that's naive. That is very naive.
But you see the stories. We did in the radio show, this was in Seattle, but there was this couple that was living in over $1 million house, collecting welfare, flying all over the world, just bilking the system. So, this doesn't sound right if you want to say that, but if you really are going to use the system like that, you should have to be accountable somehow, I think you should have to show what you're putting in. And are these people taking the money that they're getting and blowing it on other things they shouldn't be before they take care of their kids? Then they go have more kids, and it just goes right back in the system. And, you know, those are hard things to say, but if we don't start saying them, this country's going to be gone. If you're at 50% in a state like New Hampshire, think about that.
Well, we weren't at 50. We were in the 30s, and this has happened since this economic recession this depression that we're headed towards. And so, and I think I hope the election will change that. I guess I'm not supposed to say those political things, but anyway, that's my view. But yes, you're right. And that's again going to the budget thing. How can you maintain all of these niceties that are not mandated? See, I think when we start cutting, we need to always look at the whole. Always, always the whole. And always we need to say what is mandated, what is priority of the whole. Like when I look at the school budget, I try to look at the whole. If I put it here, I'm taking it from where? Because
I've got a lot of friends that are paras, and different schools, different grades, I hear the same story. There'll be cases where you have the before-school program, you have the after-school program. They're getting 3 meals a day, like you said in there.
Yes.
But the parent that's dropping them off, the example I'll get, you know, will come in like in a jogging suit with their nails all done. You know they're not going to work. So we need to track that down. If that's what you're doing, you need to be responsible. Why do we have to pay, in some cases, overtime, some of these paras? Why do we have to pay that to people that are taking advantage of the system? I think they need to.
My concern is, though, that in the tracking, is the tracking going to cost you more than you save? That's why I believe in less government is better government. I think a better way to get to that, yes, if we're going to do it, we need to track it. But from my perspective, why not just have less government? That's why I'm in favor of doing away with I'm in favor of doing away with the Department of Education. Put that on the table.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be popular. Most of my school board members wouldn't agree with me with that. And that's all right. I respect their right to disagree.
Because of their unfunded demands or
well,
whatever?
Of course,
what's the reason for getting rid of the department?
My thing with the Department of Education is that they are making decisions. What they do is they give you a carrot. They say, for instance, the perfect example was the Phoenix program. They gave us a grant to start that Phoenix program. And for the public that might not know, that's our at-risk population. And so they gave us, and I don't remember how much it was, $500,000, $1 million, whatever it was. We started the program with that money. But after a certain length of time, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the particular grant gives in time, then they take that money away. And now you've got to continue that on the operating budget that you had, even though the aldermen are not going to give you more money. So what have you done? You've taken from the average classroom, you've put 95 kids over at Elm Street, so in one class, so that you can have 87 in a school all by itself with 12 teachers or something. I'm just saying that's why I say look at the whole.
Well, they learned from the federal government, right?
The federal government really, in my view, they hurt us so much. The mandates they do for the poor, the Title I don't know if you're familiar with Title I, but Title I is a special program for our poor children. And it's a great program, not to say it's not a good program. But again, it goes to if I put it here, where am I taking it from? And when I put it with these, giving these a smaller classroom ratio and a para, and even a program where they get free books, right? And yet I have a class over here at Elm Street with 95 kids in it. What kind of logic is that? What kind of overall wisdom is? So I keep saying, let's look at the whole. If I do this, who am I hurting? What am I taking that money from? And so that's why less government is better. And that's why I don't have a problem with vouchers. I'm not sure that I'm personally in favor of the charter school in a school. The way I understand it is the charter school that we would do would be within our schools. So we wouldn't have...
I didn't even know that.
Yes, so there would be no overhead because we're already paying the overhead. So the monies that are being given to...
That's not a fair way of looking at it.
Well, thank you. That's what I thought. Representative Seidel, you and I are on the same page.
I'm not running for the Board of Education.
I wish you would. Come on down. We need all... And we got 2 wonderful new members in this just last election, and I'm so delighted. Of course, there wasn't a real election because we had 5 spots and 5 openings, But at least we had people to fill those openings, and now we're back to, because we were having meetings where we didn't have a full 9 board. Mr. Kelly, of course, wonderful man, was sick, and so he stopped coming. And so we just, one thing and another, we very seldom had a full board, so it's nice to have full board again and open.
On the classes with English as a second language, how is that coming along? Are there, is there time limits that people can attend those classes? Do they have to move along?
My understanding is, and certainly if anybody questions it further, they can contact me, and I'm happy to verify it again. But the last time I heard, the first class, they do a class where they try to teach the language. After that, those kids are mainstreamed.
I see.
So if they don't speak English, they go in first class to learn English, and then after that one class,
So they only get one class.
which is probably half hour, 45 minutes. After that, they send them to mainstream classes. And the theory is that if they're thrown into it, they're going to have to sink or swim. And I do think there's something, when necessity is the mother of invention. I think if you want to communicate bad enough, you find a way. And the kids are much more, they adapt better than us old guys. The kids do well.
I guess I don't get it. So they, when you say one class, like for what, a semester, or what do you mean one class?
No, there's a class of English.
Every day?
Yeah, every day.
Beginning of the day.
Yeah. I think I want to say we have around 1,000 in the English language learning program, and I think we have around 2,000 in special education. And I don't begrudge either of those programs. Please know, I think we should try to take care of all of our children. I do personally have a problem with illegals. I do feel, see, we cannot, if you come to the school and you have an envelope that has your name and an address in Nashville on it, we have to register you, and we have to put you in our school at our expense. And to me, and we can't track it, so we have no way of knowing how many we have like that. But do we have enough that if we didn't have them, we could have maybe 50 in that class of 95 over there?
It's just mind-boggling to me.
It is mind-boggling. And it's not fair to our children. See, I believe in helping my neighbor, but I have this simplistic approach to it. I tell myself, first I help my neighbors. If the man next to me needs help, or the man across the street. And then if I have more, I'll go to my community, and then my state, and then my nation. And after that, if there's anything left, and I don't think there will be, then I'm going to go across the waters. But until I can do that, I think I've not done justice to my own. I don't know. I think you have to limit you can only do so much.
Well, I mean, there's no denying that. And you just see it more and more. This whole entitlement mentality is what's put us to where it was. Like you said earlier, when I was a kid, which for most people it's getting old too, but not like you guys.
We're going to have to get him.
We have the experience, though.
We have the wisdom. Yes.
But you didn't want to go to school and get a free lunch.
No.
You know, there would be kids that would go without,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't be embarrassed by it, which was awful. But that's not the point. The really ones that really needed did it. Now, you can't tell me that 50% of the kids in the school system in Nashua can't afford a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't believe that.
Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes some of them are living they're not living with their mother or father. They're living with an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent. Sometimes they're in an orphanage.
What was the percentage of them, though? That's what I'm trying to say.
I think it's greater than you would think. And I certainly agree with the premise that you're making. But I do think we have to be careful for those who do have that need. I come from poverty. I come from not so much poverty, there are different kinds of poverty. There's money poverty, and then there's poverty of spirit. There's poverty of family support, that people who are alcoholics, druggies. And we have a drug problem in our community. I don't know if you saw those 2 buildings on Palm Street where they were growing.
Yeah.
What was it, $5 million street value? I mean, that's very
They
short.
didn't ask the county extension for help, did they?
They gave them all their lamps.
But I could walk there from my house.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
telling you, it blew my mind. I thought, oh my goodness. So there are those people who do those things have children, and those children, and that's why they get caught in this cycle of. And I tell my grandchildren all the time, you know, when you see people do things that you don't like, let it be a lesson to you. Learn from what they're doing. Try not to repeat the mistakes that you see other people making. But not all of us, I wasn't always smart enough to do that, I can tell you.
But see, I just think we've made it too easy. I think, you know, getting these EBT cards and with the ease of use of things like that. If you had to go in every week, show the 3 or whatever it used to be like, you had to have 3 job interviews you went on, just show the stuff. And then you'd start to see, you would see it decline. It's just too easy right now. And that doesn't take away from a situation that somebody's in. But if you just, you know, these 99 weeks of unemployment, if you can be unemployed and make almost as much as you're going to get,
that I absolutely
then going to
agree
work
with
at
you.
McDonald's, because I challenge you. You go right now through Nashua, and you find one fast food restaurant that doesn't have a help wanted sign in it.
No, and with that, I absolutely agree with you. If you're only going to make $10 more, but you're going to have to put in 40 hours of work to do it.
Plus, what
why
they
would
don't
you do it?
realize, here's the big one, and I don't know if they ever do it. They owe tax on that money someday. So what they're getting a check now without tax taken out of it if you're getting an unemployment check, but you're supposed to pay that tax on that. So I'll bet you there's a lot that just think, well, this is even more. And they don't, you know, I used to get a check for $150, now I'm getting one for $200 because they're not taking tax out of it.
Well, and you look at that on a federal level where they're saying they can't cut. And the thing that I've heard most through this election that resonates with me is, why are we giving our enemies billions of dollars? Why? They're not. You cannot buy friendship. You cannot buy it, whether it's global or local. And so why are we so stupid that we're writing? I can't believe. And yet they say we can't cut the budget. To me, that makes no sense. But maybe they know something I don't know.
No, I just keep getting worried that, you know, it's gone so far that can you fix it?
50% of the people cannot support 50%. I cannot support 50% of mine. I can't do it. I can't. And I ask myself all the time, how much can I do? This year I was so happy because I was able to, the Salvation Army, you know, at Shaw's they sell food and they will give it to the food pantry. And so this year I was happy that I could go and buy food for that, because that's a wonderful cause. I mean, there are people who need to be helped. And you don't want to miss them.
I don't have any objection to that. It's the people that abuse it.
The abuse. It is the abuse.
And I've seen that. I've worked for 2 food pantries at one time or another. And I delivered Christmas or Thanksgiving dinners to people who had big, you know, 40-inch TV screens.
Sometimes what bothered me was sometimes the people who work to support the program are taking, they go into the pantry first and take what they want, and then what's left. And that isn't the way it should be. But I tell myself, don't look at the bad things other people do. Make sure you keep your own house clean, because it is hard when you see that and you say, oh, well, they're doing it, why shouldn't I do it? And that's what's overtaken our nation, that everybody thinks it's all right to take from the system. It's not all right. In fact, while I was in Portland for the county, I had food poisoning. And they're telling me, and I said, it cost the county for me to go to that. So I said to the insurance company, I want the county paid back. Every nickel of their money. Oh, wow, they've already paid. Medicare is going to pay for your medical. And blah, blah, blah. I said, I'll die before you'll get away without paying that money. I want to see that check before I get my check, or I'm not signing off on anything. So I'm sure she thought I was, but it just grieves me to see, and it's so easy because Medicare pays those bills without questioning.
Oh, definitely.
And I called them up and said, don't pay those bills. They still paid them. They still paid. All those bills have already been paid. So unless, it appears to me anyway, unless I babysit it, unless I force them by saying I'll just show up in court and take my luck with the judge, unless I do that, they're not going to pay the county or Medicare. And it's a lot of money. My medical bills were over $10,000 for that. It was really bad. But $10,000 that you and I are paying for, and how many times does that happen? And people let it happen because they say, I'm not going to fight this system. It's frustrating, and it is frustrating. I tell you right now, it is. I wanted.
Yeah, 2 of my parents died of heart attacks or something, and the last few days they had a hospital bill that was outrageous. And, you know, I challenged it, but nobody, as you said, they don't follow through on it.
No, they don't.
I don't understand that at all.
No, if you don't make an issue, it will go unchecked.
Well, I think we're just about out of time. Carl, was there anything else we forgot we wanted to ask
Well, I
Sandra
don't
while we have
know.
her
We
here?
went through a lot of things, and I'm glad Sandra's on the county now, too, because it's helped out a lot to have the representatives, well, the majority of whom are new, understand things, what's going on. And we are going to have, I mean, I sat through an economic session today. It doesn't look good for another year. They're saying that the recession is going to last, and if Europe goes crazy, it could go into a depression very easily.
Yes.
But the emerging countries are the ones that are going to help the global GDP, as they call it. So I don't know. We got a bad situation, and hopefully we can look at it and work at it together. And as I said earlier, I think in the county, these workshops were, at least to me and to you, were very eye-opening, and we got to work together. We know we have a problem with money, and we all have a problem, statewide too. I mean, the state's
We all
not
need to
getting
share the pain. We all need, and to some extent, by doing that, you set an example.
Right.
I think when you look over and see other people, then you say, how can I do less? Why is it that the burden should all be this? Yeah, that's why I thought the guy from UNH, that was such a, I was so impressed that he said to himself, because he took a cut too.
Yeah, yeah.
He didn't have to do that, but he was willing to make a sacrifice for the greater good. And I think that as a community, we need to start looking at the greater good. We need to ask ourselves, how am I part of the solution? And if I hope, see, as an elected official, I feel we are all accountable to the public. We are all accountable to the people who elected us. But if they don't make their voices heard, we have no way of knowing what they think. So I would love to hear for any time anybody questions anything I do. I hold myself accountable to those people. And so
When are the school board meetings? Are they the same time every month?
we have, I want to say it's the first Monday of every month, and it's at 7 o'clock. Of course, they can go on the website, and on the website it will have an agenda, because if the topic you want to talk about is not on the agenda, you would have to wait until the end of the meeting, unless you go to one of the board members and ask them to make a motion to waive that for you. And if you go to a board member, most of us are happy to do that, because I wouldn't want to sit for 4 hours.
Are they the same place, same location?
It's most always at North.
At North.
Yeah, once in a blue moon, we'll have it at admin or South, but 95% of the time it's at North. We have a beautiful conference room, part of that beautiful school over there. That's,
That is
if
a very
you
nice
haven't
school.
taken the tour, that school is
They should have just made one
State
big
of the
one,
art.
by the way, but that's a whole other story.
state of the art.
And
Well-
our listeners, too, can also notify us, Pete. We have our websites listed on the nationalgop.org website. You can look up either Pete Silva or Carl Seidel and write to us. Let us know what questions you might have.
If it's
or
bad, just
topics.
write to Carl. But
I tell people if it's bad, call Bob Hollowell.
there you go. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Once again, I want to thank our guest, Sandra
It's a
Ziehm.
pleasure.
And Sandra, you do a lot of work, and it doesn't go unnoticed,
much.
believe me.
Well, I
We
enjoy it.
appreciate
I
it.
actually enjoy it. It's,
Good.
you know.
We need more Sandra, so go out for the school board next year. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.